It's about that time once again, people. Another tale of souls and swords is descending upon us and ready to dive into. Hey, what's up everyone? I'm Jakejames Lugo and welcome to the channel. So once again we find ourselves returning to the stage of history for another entry of the Soulcalibur franchise. This one is a little bit different than the last. And it's funny too because the last game was so successful on the PlayStation 2, GameCube, and Xbox that you would expect them to do another thing like very similar to that. But things didn't really go that way. So without further ado, let's just dive right into the next entry, which is Soulcalibur III. Or should I say,
Soulcalibur III.
Soulcalibur III is the fourth game in the ongoing series from Namco, but the third entry to use the name Soulcalibur. It released on the PlayStation 2 in 2005, a few years after its predecessor, and received an updated version in arcades in 2006. I never played the arcade version, so everything I say now is going to be based on the PlayStation 2 version. Weirdly enough, this game was a console exclusive to the PlayStation 2. This always confused me because Soulcalibur 2 was on every console at the time and made a significant impact. What's also strange is how Soulcalibur 2 didn't have any guest characters on the roster. It is possible in the game's Create a Character section, called Create a Soul, to make a fighter that resembles Cosmos from the Xenosaga series, which was also made by Namco. However, this is only a collection of custom character parts and not an official character made for the roster, so I can't count her as a guest character. Anyway, Soulcalibur III takes place shortly after the events of Soulcalibur II. The timeline here is very speculative, but most places say that everything picks up about 4 months after the previous game. The White Knight Siegfried breaks free from his Dark Persona nightmare and uses the Holy Blade Soulcalibur to seal off the evil sword known as Soul Edge. With both swords embraced within one another for the moment, Siegfried travels around the world in search of a definitive way to destroy Soul Edge for good. However, Soul Edge finds a way to manifest itself into another shell and goes on a killing spree in search of Siegfried across Europe. Eventually, this leads to a fateful battle between the two knights. In the background of all this, however, a mysterious man named Zasalamel puts into motion a plot to take the power of the legendary weapons for himself, controlling things from afar. Between this and an ensemble of warriors once again searching for the legendary swords, Soulcalibur III tries to be even more epic than its predecessor. But does it do so? Well, that depends on what you're looking for. Despite there being no guest characters of any kind in Soulcalibur III, the roster still is bigger. It's nice to see the story continue from the last game and really build upon what made that game so successful. It looks great, it sounds great. I always love the graphics of the older Soulcalibur games, especially the music, man. The music is still on point this time around. It still has some really awesome tracks with a few that return from the previous game. But one of my favorites is the one in Forsaken Sanctuary, is when you find Siegfried and Nightmare fighting against each other, and it just sounds so freaking epic, man. Another thing that I really like about Soulcalibur III is the cutscenes that you get during the arcade mode, which is called Tale of Souls, and like all the different cutscenes that you get for various different characters, depending on who you're playing as, they look really good. They're using the in-game engine, so it's not like they're really like crazy cinematic and stuff. I wish that we were able to get that quality, but I understand for the time frame this game was made, they weren't able to do that with the PlayStation 2. But for what they had, it still looked pretty awesome. So besides the story and the presentation, which we already know was going to be good, let's talk about this gameplay because, like always, whenever we're talking about a Soulcalibur game, we want some good 3D fighting gameplay, and Soulcalibur III definitely delivers, but with a few things changed up and a little bit of a different flavor. Everything in Soulcalibur III feels just about the same as in Soulcalibur II. The 3D fighting is very similar, with the biggest changes being the 3 new characters added to the roster, the new game modes, and the ability to create a custom character. These are nice additions to an already solid gameplay formula from before, so I don't mind that everything feels the same. For the super hardcore fighting fan, there's a lot of changes to the movesets of returning characters, with some of them getting new moves and adjustments to the rest of their attacks. The new characters have a lot of interesting options for their unique fighting styles that make them stand out from the rest of the roster. My favorite of the new group is Zasalamel. His moves just look devastating and vicious. Tira is pretty crazy with her hula hoop blade, and Setsuka is elegant with her umbrella sword, but they didn't click with me as much as Zasalamel did. I definitely like all of their designs and the way that they fight so much different from one another. While fighting, the guard impact tech is still here again for the entire cast to use, giving you a chance to shift momentum during a match with a well-timed parry and counterattack. Like I said in my Soulcalibur II review, you could find yourself in skirmishes while you'll be using it back and forth a lot. Which leads to my one big issue with Soulcalibur III. The game's CPU and opponents can be ridiculously tough, almost borderline unfair in some moments. I play on normal difficulty when I review games, and the entire time it felt like I was playing on a much harder difficulty setting than normal. The CPU has godlike reaction and incredible luck when it comes to the timing of combos and knocking you off the stage. It gets to the point of frustration when you're playing through Tales of the Sword and find yourself redoing matches because of how annoying the CPU can get. Some people might dismiss this by saying that you need to get good and outsmart the AI where you can, but I'm pretty good at fighting games like Soulcalibur, and even I was finding these opponents a little cheap at times. But as a whole, the fighting in Soulcalibur III is pretty solid once again. It feels good moving around and attacking, the stages look and sound great like before, and the new characters add enough to the balance of the roster to make the game feel like a very solid sequel.
Versus Setsuka. Fight!
Now, I really like a lot of the changes that you get for certain characters returning from Soulcalibur II into Soulcalibur III. Some of my favorites like Mitsurugi, Sophitia, and a few others feel even more solid than they did in that previous game. And that's exactly what a fighting game sequel should do. It should still offer somewhat of a familiar thing from the previous entry, but build upon that. Don't really change it too drastically, but change it just enough to feel different, but still have that basis that you love so much. Something I should mention is that all the generic characters that we saw from Soulcalibur II, they're not here anymore. Instead of those characters that are having their own predetermined movesets, you got the Create a Soul mode, which allows you to create characters, or even allows the computer to create its own version of like generic characters that you would see in other game modes. I'm actually totally fine with that. I don't miss any of the generic characters from Soulcalibur II. They were a thing for some people, including like Lizardman and stuff, but if we have the ability to create our own characters and it kind of just allows the roster to be a little bit more fleshed out with real defined characters that are related to the story or just the franchise overall, again, I'm totally cool with that. I don't feel like it's something that we've lost that's pretty significant. Now, of course, another thing we do have to touch on is all the extra content and other game modes that are included in Soulcalibur III, because, like I said before, there's a lot of things that are changed up from Soulcalibur II. There's a lot more game modes and a lot of other neat little goodies that are pretty cool, but not everything is as it seems. What I like about Soulcalibur III is how it tries to introduce new and different things to the series, even though it doesn't always work out good. We get this in the form of new game modes that either try to improve on stuff we've already seen in other fighting games or go in a completely different direction. Tale of Souls is the arcade mode, which plays out as you'd expect, but the presentation is entirely different. You're given a lot of text explaining the story in between matches for the character you play as, and you even get to see some cutscenes of them interacting with other fighters at various points. Ending cutscenes unlock for your character after the final battle with Abyss, which admittedly are much nicer than the ones that we get in Soulcalibur II. Completing this with every character gets repetitive, but it's the same thing with any other basic arcade mode with less emphasis on its presentation. There's also the Soul Arena, a collection of missions that you can undertake with different stipulations for completing them. Some of them can be very silly and fun, while others can be very challenging and borderline insane, but completing them can net you in some extra bonuses. That is, if you can undertake their incredibly different sense of fairness that the game likes to throw at you pretty frequently.
This is Night Terror. Fight!
Damn! This is ridiculous!
Speaking on things that are different, the most impactful change comes from the Create a Soul feature, which allows you to make custom characters to your heart's content. It's very basic in comparison to what we have now, but understand that this was done at a time when the series never really dabbled in something like custom fighters. Many other fighting games at the time were doing something like this, but not that much better, so I give them credit for at least trying. This ended up evolving into something much better later on for the series. Which now leads me to the one game mode that I have the strongest feelings on, Chronicles of the Sword. Now, hear me out here for a bit, people, if you would. This has to be the absolute worst game mode ever included in a Soul Calibur game. I honestly have much fonder memories of this back in the day than what I do now, and I really feel like we were settling pretty hard for this game big time. For those that don't know, you create an entirely new character from scratch in order to play this mode, which is a problem already because I can't use any of the previous characters I made with Create a Soul from the start. You can then take your character through a non-canon story that involves a blend of tower defense and Soul Calibur fighting. On paper this sounds pretty interesting, but in practice, it's a boring disaster. The problem with Chronicles of the Sword is that you're constantly at the mercy of circumstance and bad luck in matches, while playing through a mode that becomes super boring very quickly. For every part of the Chronicles, you move a group of units on a board to capture different outposts and strongholds in order to complete a stage. Not only is there a ton of loading screens in between each part of the mode, but a lot of the time you'll end up controlling characters other than your custom fighter and waiting for outposts to be destroyed before you can continue moving on the board. Compared to everything else included in Soul Calibur 3, this mode is boring, it's not fun to play, and it feels like a complete and total miss. In terms of unlockables, I should mention that every part of Soul Calibur 3 nets you in gold by simply just engaging with it. Every matchup that you complete, every mission, every part of other game modes, you gain this gold that you could spend in the game's shop. This allows you to unlock new characters, new weapons for the entire roster, brand new game modes, create a soul parts for different custom characters, and a bunch of different artwork and stuff that is actually pretty good. I actually like this stuff because it rewards you for pretty much engaging with every aspect of the game, and that's a huge positive for me. But once again, let me reiterate because my god, yo, Chronicles of the Sword is the worst game mode of this game, hands down, without question. It's just so out there and different compared to the rest of the game. It just ends up being so boring. Like, I would be totally fine, right, if Chronicles of the Sword had a story with it that was related to the Soul Calibur franchise story itself, or just the overarching story of Soul Calibur 3, but because it's non-canon, it just makes everything about it that I dislike about that mode so much more worse, and I feel like I'm wasting a huge amount of time just engaging with it. Besides the characters that you want to unlock that are part of Chronicles of the Sword, that's totally cool, but everything else, man, I could totally do without Chronicles of the Sword. It's just a waste of time. It just doesn't need to be there. I would have rather taken any other type of game mode or addition to the other game modes instead of this. That's just my own personal opinion. Some people might disagree with me, but this is probably the worst aspect of this entire game. So to wrap everything up, can I recommend that you guys check out Soul Calibur 3 on the PlayStation 2? Yeah, this game is still pretty good. It's not as popular as its predecessor or any of the sequels that came afterwards, but I definitely give Soul Calibur 3 a lot of props for introducing a lot of elements that became significant later on with the Soul Calibur franchise. I like the roster, I especially like the new characters, and I like just how the game feels overall to control and play and fight against other people. I think also Tales of Soul is pretty cool with the cutscenes and just the overall feel, look, and presentation of Soul Calibur 3 in general. I absolutely hate Chronicles of the Sword. I think it's the worst aspect of this game. However, despite me hating that part of it, I don't think any of the other good stuff that I like about Soul Calibur 3 gets muddied up because of that. I still think it's an overall really good fighting game that improves upon its predecessor. If you're a big fan of Soul Calibur, then definitely check this game out if you haven't already. It still has a lot of cool stuff and origins of interesting things that you definitely probably appreciate later on. But if you're not a huge Soul Calibur fan or a big fighting game fan, you'll still have a lot of fun playing through Soul Calibur 3. It still has a lot of great stuff to offer and definitely still lives up to the legacy of the franchise.
The legend will never die.
And there we have it, my friends. Those are my overall thoughts about Soul Calibur 3 on the PS2. It's still a good game. I don't think it's as hype or as crazy as Soul Calibur 2. I still think that's the most epic fighting game that I've played, especially with this franchise. But I do appreciate that Soul Calibur 3 tried to do other things that were different and brand new that, again, helped out and eventually became something awesome later on with Soul Calibur 4, 5, and 6. I know at some point I'll eventually get to those games, so let me know in the comment section down below if you guys want me to take a look at Soul Calibur 4 at some point, or 5 or 6, because I know I've already done a review of Soul Calibur 6. I'll probably play that game again at some point, especially with all the new characters it has. But with 4 and 5, let me know if you guys want to see reviews of that stuff. But also on top of that, like always, this is just my opinion about Soul Calibur 3. Let me know your thoughts about this game down below in the comment section too. Tell me, are you a fan of Soulcalibur 3? Do you like any of the characters in this? Are you a big fan of the franchise? What are some other fighting games or just games that are similar to Soulcalibur that you think are really good? Talk to me about that stuff down below in the comments section. Hey there everyone, thanks for watching this video. I appreciate all of your support as always. On the side here I have some game reviews and other cool videos you might like to watch. Make sure you leave me a comment down below and subscribe to the channel too. Don't forget to hit that bell icon to be in the know when I post up new videos for you to check out. I'll talk to you all again real soon. Peace out and stay epic everybody.